Sports are not just a hobby, they're a $500 billion industry, with each team in the big leagues being worth billions by itself. Now the question is, which team is worth the most? Or more importantly, which football is gonna be on top? From the MLB to the NFL, the NBA and the Champions League, this is the most valuable team since 2006. In 1999, Dan Snyder bought the Washington Redskins for a record $800 million, the largest deal in US sports at the time. From there, Snyder ran the team very aggressively as a business, pouring money into marketing, sponsorships, merchandise, and stadium operations. The Redskins even owned the largest NFL stadium at the time with the FedEx Field in Maryland. The large field, combined with their loyal fan base, meant that they would sell out crowds for decades, even if they had poor performances on the field. After a great performance in the playoffs in 2005, the team decided to supercharge their offense. For this, they brought in coach Al Saunders from Kansas City. With him, they also signed two wide receivers, Antoine Randall L. and Brandon Lloyd. Now, they weren't just making bank on their stadium, merchandise and sponsorships, but they also owned an incredibly expensive talent roster. If everything went according to plan, they would have probably stayed on top of this list for a while. But unfortunately for them, their 2006 season was horrible. They finished 5-11, the last place in the NFC East Division. By 2007, they lost their spot on this list and the Dallas Cowboys would overtake them. We'll be seeing the Cowboys for quite a while, so I'll talk about them later. First, let's discuss the team that would overtake even the Cowboys in late 2007. I'm talking about Manchester United.
Exclusively for the supporters of the greatest football team in the world, Manchester United.
Whether you prefer American football or soccer, we can all agree that the latter is the most popular sport in the world. And even though the sport is a lot more spread out into many smaller leagues, the most valuable soccer team in 2007 also became the world's most valuable sports team overall. The reason why this was Manchester United is quite interesting actually. While they were one of the world's strongest soccer clubs at the time, they weren't exactly the undisputed number one. But locally in the Premier League, the UK's very own soccer league, they were the best. This just so happens to also be the most heavily commercialized local league in soccer history. The Premier League is quite new. It was only founded in 1992, and when it was created with TV in mind. This means that everything was set up perfectly for it to be broadcasted worldwide. Additionally, they also heavily marketed themselves in many foreign countries in Asia, Africa, and South America. And as English was a global language, it was very easy to strike international TV deals. The stations didn't even have to do any extra work. All they needed was to sign a deal and they could just display whatever the UK was showing in real time, with English commentary and all included. This worked so well that to this day all the top teams in the Premier League have more fans than the entirety of their country's population. Even in 2008, a whole 2 teams from this league actually made the list, with Arsenal crawling up from below. Manchester United itself was simply the strongest competitor at the time. They won both the Premier League and the Champions League in 2008. They had the world's biggest rising star with Cristiano Ronaldo on their team, and their valuation just kept shooting up. Within the span of 5 years, from 2008 to 2013, the club went from being worth about $1.8 billion to being worth more than $3 billion. But the Spanish weren't gonna let them stay on top forever, because in 2013, Real Madrid took the number 1 spot. While Spain's La Liga is not the most popular league in the world, it houses 2 of the most dominant teams in football history, those being FC Barcelona and Real Madrid. While Manchester United was the best in the UK, these 2 teams were the very best in the world. especially in 2013. The thing that makes Real Madrid so different from other teams is that they are partially owned by fans, meaning that rather than being privately owned by just one guy with a lot of money, the fans act as a sort of shareholder, making sure that the team's performance stays on top. This in part led to Florentino Perez becoming the director of the team. He created the Galacticos policy, meaning that every year the team had to buy at least one additional star player to boost their ranks. And while the policy finished in 2006, the mentality stayed, as they continued to regularly sign star players over to their team. Through this, their roster for the 2013 and 14 season was absolutely stacked. They had super talents like Cristiano Ronaldo, Benzema and Pepe, all playing for the same club. Of course, that's not where it stops, because outside of the usual revenue streams like match days, broadcasting rights, merchandising and sponsorships, the team also owned their own stadium and training facilities. And now the only thing missing was to win the Champions League, and that's exactly what they did in the 2013-14 season. And just to put into perspective exactly how dominant they were, within the span of 5 years from 2013 to 2018, they would win 4 out of 5 Champions Leagues. Just an absolutely crazy performance. When soccer was dominated, it became time for a different sport to scoop up that #1 spot. Let's welcome the Dallas Cowboys.
And he's gonna jump in the Salvation Army kettle. So's everyone.
In 2015, the Dallas Cowboys would overtake everyone else on this list. They had already been the most valuable NFL team since 2007. Unlike the soccer clubs we just talked about, they didn't achieve this through the results of their matches, but rather through a very strong brand presence, good marketing, and high profit margins. Just like how they're known as America's team, they did the one thing that the US does the best: make a ton of money. The Dallas Cowboys have fans all throughout the nation, but their merchandise goes even further than that. You can find hats, t-shirts, caps and hoodies, and all sorts of accessories with the famous star logo everywhere in the world, even in places where no one actually watches the NFL. Their other sources of revenue are pretty standard for a sports team, such as their large stadium, high ticket sales, premium seating, and many more. One of their largest revenue streams is sponsorship money, and being classified the top valued NFL team for 9 years in a row means that they become even more attractive to sponsors. Additionally, they really know how to manage their money. They manage to keep their operating income margins quite high, meaning that they make a lot of profit from their revenue. For example, in 2015, out of $620 million in revenue, $270 million, so about 40% of it, was profit. With these huge numbers, it makes sense why they would be valued at over $4 billion. The Cowboys would remain on top for quite a while, so let's talk about a team in a different sport that has been on this list this whole time. Let's talk about the New York Yankees.
Brandon Hyde's throwing his helmet away. Brandon Hyde is pointing at the Yankees dugout, and the benches have emptied.
The New York Yankees are a very interesting case of a most valuable sports team. They appeared on this list in 2007 and haven't left it since. They are also the only baseball team to be featured consistently. And why is this the case? Well, there's a few factors. First of all, let's talk about how they make the bulk of their revenue. The MLB, unlike the NFL or the Champions League, allows teams to keep the broadcasting rights for their local areas. And considering that the Yankees are based in New York, the wealthiest city on earth, they already make a ton of revenue purely through their broadcasting network. Additionally, they're by far the most popular baseball brand in the world, meaning that they attract even more sponsors with bigger deals, making their own broadcasting network a true goldmine. Additionally, their stadium seat sales are great, since they've always been performing quite well in the MLB. But most interestingly, they almost function like a clothing brand when it comes to merchandise sales. The New York Yankees logo is famous around the world ever since the 90s and early 2000s popularized it in streetwear in hip-hop. At some point, you would see their logo on caps and hats and hoodies everywhere in the world, even with people who had no idea about baseball. You could be walking around anywhere in the Americas, in Europe, and in Southeast Asia without ever escaping that logo. And just like any streetwear fashion brand, over time their products became expensive. So expensive, in fact, that they even collaborated with brands like Gucci and Supreme to make limited collections. All of this considered, their revenue still wasn't quite as great as it sounds. But the fact that they operated a lot like a clothing brand and that they own a huge chunk of land and stadium in New York City meant that their valuation would be a lot higher compared to their revenue. You see, while a team like the Dallas Cowboys was valued at around 4 to 5 times their yearly revenue, the Yankees were actually valued at more than 7 times their yearly revenue in 2017. Today in 2025, as their brand keeps expanding, this number went up to 11.3 times their revenue. The Yankees truly are a ginormous money-making machine. In 2018, they even managed to surpass both Real Madrid and FC Barcelona to become the second highest valued sports team in the world. A truly impressive feat for the only team in its league that is featured on this list. Talking about teams from different sports that got quite high on this list, let's talk about the Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Knicks.
James goes inside, banks it home, and a foul. Achua tried to block it, and James with a chance.
In the late 2010s and early 2020s, two basketball teams had a bitter rivalry to become the most valuable team in the NBA. The New York Knicks and Los Angeles Lakers. Both teams were definitely contenders for the best in their sport, but neither of them was truly dominating. Still, that didn't stop them from making a ton of money. Their true value came from their locations, legacy, and brand power. Let's start with the Knicks. The Knicks play in arguably the most famous court on earth, the Madison Square Garden. An arena that is as famous for their concerts and business events as it is for basketball. Even when the team wasn't performing too well, the Garden stayed full, with ticket prices among the highest in sports. The Knicks also control tons of premium seating, advertising, and sponsorship deals tied to the arena itself. By 2020, Forbes valued them at over $4.6 billion, and that number just kept climbing simply because of where they are, New York City, the biggest media market in the United States. Now, on the other side of the country, you've got the Los Angeles Lakers. Sure, the Knicks are popular among NBA fans, but the Lakers are worldwide sensations. Their players have become true celebrities. Even before LeBron James joined, they were already worth billions. And talking about LeBron, except for maybe Cristiano Ronaldo, there is no sportsman in the entire world as famous as him. He by himself is already worth about $1.3 billion. They also had a massive local TV deal with Spectrum Sports Net, reportedly worth billions over 20 years. Especially since LeBron joined in 2018, their valuation grew like crazy. And then in 2020, they would win the NBA Finals, putting their valuation at over $4.4 billion. Unfortunately for them though, this was when the pandemic hit. During this time, most basketball teams stopped growing their valuations, remaining somewhat stagnant until the quarantine and restrictions were off. NFL teams, on the other hand, recovered quite a lot quicker. And so by 2022, almost all the teams on this list would be from the NFL. That being said, the Lakers might appear again next year in Forbes' list of the highest valued sports teams in the world, because they just recently completed a deal selling at a valuation of about $10 billion US. This would catapult them right back into the top 4. Alright, that's it, and like always, have a good one.